I fell ill. High fever and delirium. My brain refused to connect the dots. I wandered through dark corridors, and electrical cables turned into stinging snakes. Walls closed in, crushing my body with a crunch. I was constantly thirsty. I was constantly short of air. The nights stretched endlessly, and the days flew by so quickly that at one point I seriously thought the Earth had stopped rotating, and it was now perpetual daylight in the States. In the viscous swamp of my nightmares, I tried numerous times to draw an ellipse through 6 points, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. And that was perhaps the most terrifying thing. The first sensation that made me realize I was recovering was the fresh, moist air flowing from the wide open window. Rain in early August. After that, things started to improve. Do you think I spent a long time gathering my strength after my illness, hesitating to go down again? The devil take it. I went down there 2 days after I first got out of bed. I went down, confirmed that all this really existed, and then returned. That was enough for me for the first time. Sometimes I think my illness was sent down from above as a kind of respite, so I could get used to all this underground stuff and not go crazy. I began going down every day, or rather, every night. I had to catch up on sleep at my workstation during the day. I completely detached myself from life, cutting off practically all ties with anyone, except perhaps my son and daughter. The dungeon, that was the only reality that felt real to me. I no longer had any fears about going down there, though mindful of the strange sounds, I now always wore a huge hunting knife on my belt, and my sense of wonder dulled. It was as if I'd begun some great task, doing it meticulously, methodically, step by step. Yes, I call this place the Underground. Sometimes, without a hint of irony, I call it the Lominsky Metro. In our city, he was the only person I wouldn't hesitate to name anything after, but more often, I simply call it the Ring. There are indeed 6 stations, and each station, if, of course, you don't count the omnipresent dust and the lack of escalators, is as if brand new, as if the orchestra would strike up and the blue ribbon would be cut at any moment. You know, I often imagine these stations brightly lit, the platforms crowded with people, the sound of jokes and laughter, a fresh wind blowing from the mouth of the tunnel, and, as if urging it on, a smart express train bursting noisily out into the open. And you know, I get a lump in my throat. I'd like to ride that blue train every day. I named the stations because, to my surprise, despite their complete completion, none of them had metal letters spelling out names on their walls. I've already mentioned Kurchatovskaya. It became my base, so to speak. From there, I traveled through the tunnels, from station to station. I slightly widened the tunnel I dug to make it easier to climb in and out, and I installed a lock on the corridor door in case of an invasion by uninvited plumbers. Behind Kurchatovskaya, about 600 meters away, roughly in the middle of Pobedy Street, underground of course, is Uralskaya Station. It simply couldn't be called anything else. Imagine columns trimmed with reddish-brown granite with emerald green capitals made of serpentine and amazonite. Trees, real trees. Walking between them, you can lose yourself and think you're in a forest. And the mosaic panel on the wall, wondrous mountains, mysterious lakes, dense forests, cheerful rivers. Here is the inescapable beauty of the ancient and eternally youthful Urals. And this panel is made not with just any smalt, but with genuine Ural gems, primarily jasper in a wide variety of colors and shades, although there is also onyx, serpentine, ophiocalcite, and porphyry. In short, all the riches of the Ural treasures. At the end of the station is a stunning stone flower. The first time I saw it, I admired it for almost an hour, unable to tear myself away from this wondrous sight. I think the man who sculpted it is a master from God, a match for Bazov's Danila. A large red and green lizard, also made of stone, sits on the flower, and behind, on the wall, are depicted characters from Ural fairy tales in a completely unusual, unconventional, but very attractive manner. Next along the line is the Rabachaya station, located not far from the Sinara station, under the slide. In the massive pylons running along the platform, on the hall side, there are shallow niches containing electro-formed sculptures. I tapped them, and they're hollow inside, on low marble pedestals, depicting representatives of various professions. Perhaps they're meant to symbolize the most common occupations of Snezhinsk residents. There are 7 of them, slightly taller than a human. The scientist is an elderly man wearing an academic cap, holding a microscope. The engineer is a middle-aged man calculating on a slide rule. The doctor is a slender woman with a stethoscope on her chest. And next to her is a little girl whose head the woman is stroking. The worker is a young man holding a hammer by his right foot. The teacher is a woman again, this time an older woman, wearing glasses, holding a globe. Next to her, a boy points to Snezhinsk, not Moscow, as I initially thought, on the globe. The warrior is an unsmiling man with a machine gun slung over his shoulder, and closing the gallery is the Kolkhoznitsa, a full-breasted, cheerful girl holding a sheaf of wheat. All these figures are somewhat reminiscent of the sculptures at Ploshad Revolutsii station in Moscow, but they were clearly created by a different sculptor. They are less artificial, but no less skillful, more human, more lifelike. And despite the seemingly naive symbolism, they don't look ridiculous. They exude pride and spirituality, from Rabachaya, as well as from the next station, which I call Snezhnaya. Another tunnel branches off to the right, but I'll talk about these tunnels a little later. Snezhnaya, located beneath School number 121, is striking in its white marble and other white materials. The most interesting thing is that I didn't immediately appreciate the full charm of this station. The dust and darkness hindered me, but when my imagination taught me to picture my dungeon as it should appear in the light of bright, welcoming lamps, washed and cleaned, joyful and calm, then and only then, penetrating the soul-crushing greyness with my thoughts, did I grasp the delicate, barely perceptible charm of a winter fairy tale emanating from every part of this station. Under the surgical building, is a station that, after much deliberation, I named Zoological, although I realize the name isn't entirely appropriate. It requires something less formal, something more tender, more intimate. At the very center of the station stands something resembling a huge tree, or perhaps a cliff draped with creepers. Perched upon it are the most diverse representatives of the animal kingdom of our forests. On the lower ledges, flanked by a moose, a bear, a wolf, and a wild boar. A little higher up, a lynx, a roe deer, a hare, and a mating capercaillie perch. Above them, all sorts of small fry like martins, squirrels, crows, and woodpeckers, while the very top is crowned by a kite with its enormous wings spread wide. All of this is crafted from black cast iron, and even a layman can easily recognize the famous Kesley casting. The station's columns, crafted from grey-blue marble, widen slightly toward their capitals, which resemble fantastical, unimaginable plants. I imagine the station's light fittings are hidden right there, behind the capitals, and I imagine what a soft, caressing light must flood this hall, as if the sun were illuminating the central composition. On the wall is another mosaic. The image resembles a gigantic ornament in which dozens, if not hundreds, of animals seem to flow into one another, making it impossible to discern where one fleeting, swift body begins and another ends. I imagine children would be fascinated by this station, standing there for hours, gaping in amazement at some unknown artistry. And finally, the last station is Lenin Square. I'm sure that's what it should have been called. Here, on the bas-reliefs under the ceiling, are little Volodya Ulyanov, and we will take a different path, and a hut in Razliv, and a speech from an armored car, and peace to the peoples, and other images taken from famous paintings. A bronze Lenin in a niche at the end stretches out his hand, and on the wall behind him, the aurora fires and groups of sailors and workers run off into the distance with rifles at the ready. Okay, I got carried away. Of course, you're not at all interested in knowing how these stations are designed, because a perfectly understandable question is on the tip of your tongue, choking you up. Okay, I'll get to it now. But here's what I still want to tell you. The person who conceived this particular design for the Snezhinsk Metro is a genius. A genius because he expressed the very essence of the city, bringing to life its immortal soul. Think about it. Wonderful people surrounded by a beautiful reality that helps them create and inspires them to new achievements. The energetic Kurchatovskaya, Rabachaya, and Ploshchad Lenina stations embody the pathos of labor, creativity, and a revolutionary breakthrough into the future, while the gentle and sincere Uralskaya, Snezhnaya, and Zoologicheskaya stations seem to support them, bringing people the harmony, tenderness, and purity they so desperately need. I would like to live in such a world,